I disagree with you that there's a God. Yes, I do.
Thank you. Exactly. You made that real clear, and that's your right, and I respect that.
Yeah.
But I don't respect you intellectually if you're going to tell me, oh no, we agree, because everything's subjective.
Wait.
We don't agree.
But, okay.
I think there's a God, you think there's no God. I respect your right to be an atheist.
So yeah, I'm not an atheist. I don't. Okay, so this is it. I don't like say there is no God, but I don't say there is a God. But this is all I'm saying. Is yes, we live on Earth. We live in a physical desire to steal stuff from the store because I don't see material possessions as defining myself. I define myself based on my life experience. Like you see what I'm saying? Like I don't know. Like all I'm saying is that we can't say that something's inherently good, something's inherently evil. To do that is to set things apart. Once you set things apart, you make separations. Once you make separations, you allow things to happen. Like everything, like I said earlier, the creation story, it's telling us we're all the same, but we don't look at each other as we're the same. We look at each other as we look at each other, and what do you see? You don't see a person, you see the clothes they're wearing, the car they're driving. You have all these things that you set up as your self-identity that is superficial. Like if you listen to people speak, they don't talk about anything at all. Well, for the most part, except superficial like stuff. Like, oh, I went to the mall, the football game. It's all superficial. There's nothing, and like that can be a good thing. But the thing is that it's being used against us. Like to go back to what I said before, they're using our natural drives and urges against us. And who's doing that? Like businesses are doing, companies are doing. You flip through a magazine and you see a really beautiful girl, like advertise in a makeup advertisement. How many, like she's like she's one in a million, but all these girls like look at this and they're like, I have to be that way.
All right, now the creation account talks about the fact that the Creator loves you so much so that he sent his only son, Jesus, to die on a cross to forgive you and me for our sin and to give us eternal life. Have you put your faith in him?
No.
No? Why not?
Because I don't think I need that to be happy.
Yeah, but if he really loves you, wouldn't it be natural to respond to his love by loving him in return?
And as I said, who my God is everybody around me. Because we're all part of this we're all on this earth together.
Okay,
and we lose sight of that.
If he's part of God and if I'm part of God and I haul back and slap him in the face, what just happened? Part of God just hit part of God. So why is it wrong for me to slap him in the face?
I don't understand where you're going.
You said we're all part of God. Fine, I'm taking what you say seriously. I'm part of God, he's part of God, according to your view. I slap him in the face.
But according to my view, God doesn't exist.
I thought you just said we're all part of God.
I said we're all God in ourselves. I don't think there is a God.
Okay.
So if you to say that you slapped somebody and you're part of God, I would definitely say that's not right because I don't believe in God because everything's subjective. You see what I'm saying? Like,
okay, if everything's subjective, why are you using rational thought and language to talk to me?
Because we have a shared language that allows us to do so.
But if everything is subjective, how on earth can you mean anything when you use language?
Exactly. That's my whole point. Thank you very much.
You bet. Have a great day.
Hey, thanks.
Why did you waste your time talking to me?
Look, you're not. I didn't waste my time because I listened to what you. I listened to what you said, and I'm gonna I'm gonna put it with my ideas. I'm not. Look, I'm not like trying to argue with you or anything. Of course.
No, you're not arguing. You're playing a game, and I enjoy games at times.
We're discussing ideas, right?
But I don't enjoy this game. All right?
Is this a game? How is this a game?
Because you're saying everything's subjective.
It is subjective.
Well, if everything's subjective,
tell me what's not subjective. You give me a point or something that's subjective.
I sure will. I am listening and trying to understand what you mean by your use of words. I am trying to respond as rationally as I am capable to what I hear you saying. But you have just communicated to me, I'm sorry, everything's subjective. Well, if everything's subjective, then I can't understand what you're saying, and you can't understand what I'm saying, because it's all just subjective. See, I can't live in that kind of world, because that world just breaks down all over the place. It makes no sense.
Where does it break down?
Because you totally redefine words. Words don't mean anything except what you subjectively mean.
Right.
Baloney.
How's that baloney?
If I say I hate him...
No, okay, so baloney, you just
No,
said
listen.
baloney. Baloney's a lunch meat. Baloney's a lunch meat.
Yeah, you can use it symbolically to mean something other than meat that you eat at lunch.
Subjective. So that's subjective.
No,
Yeah,
that is called analogy that's called metaphor. Okay?
Yeah, that's
now, when I say
subjective.
I hate him,
Metaphors are subjective.
that is the opposite of saying I love him. But if everything's subjective, then no. There's no difference between love and hate. It's all just a personal trip. It's totally subjective. And that's where we disagree. Strongly, I disagree with you.
Okay.
I think this is really here. I don't think this is subjectively here. I think there's such a thing as reality. And this is objectively here, this step. And I can step up on it, and I can step off of it.
Right.
And I think you're there. That's why I've been struggling to understand what you have been trying to communicate to me.
Right.
I don't just say, well, you're a dream I'm having. No, I take you seriously. I seek to understand you and then respond reasonably to you.
You seek to understand me, but you understand me how you want to understand me, or how you perceive me.
No, I am
to
working
be.
as hard as I can to understand what you believe. And you obviously disagree with me, and that's cool. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, I don't but like,
Yes, you
I
do
don't
disagree with me,
what
sir,
you're
and don't
saying.
lie to yourself and lie to me and tell me that you agree with me.
I disagree with you that there's a God. Yes, I do.
Thank you. Exactly. You made that real clear, and that's your right, and I respect that.
Yeah.
But I don't respect you intellectually if you're going to tell me, oh, no, we agree, because everything's subjective.
Wait.
We don't agree.
But okay.
I think there's a God, you think there's no God.
So-
I respect your right to be an atheist.
So yeah, I'm not an atheist. I don't. Okay, so this is it. I don't like say there is no God, but I don't say there is a God. But this is all I'm saying. Is yes, we live on Earth. We live in a physical world, and yes, it does exist. But how you look at things is up to you. It's not my version of reality is not your version of reality.
Yeah.
Apparently, but it's the same. But we live in the same world, right?
Right.
But I don't see things the same way as you do. That's
Correct.
all I'm saying. But like for us to like say that something's inherently good, inherently bad, there's good and evil, that totally like neglects everything that's in between those 2 points.
All right.
So that's what I was saying earlier, like going back like to that, like that's what I was saying earlier, is that like when we make sex seem as if it's a temptation that we have to hide until you meet that one person, then it kind of puts a tint of shame to it. And there's no shame in sex. Do you think there's shame in sex?
Sex is a beautiful gift given us by God to be enjoyed within the context of relationship. A relationship that is a lot deeper than hooking up for the weekend. A relationship that is a lot deeper than, oh gosh, I didn't realize you had that bump. I'm out of here. A relationship that is a lifelong commitment. And it's within the context of that lifelong commitment that God calls us to enjoy sex. But if you rip sex out of that lifelong commitment, according to Christ, you are dehumanizing yourself and you're dehumanizing your sex partner. You're turning her into a Barbie doll, you're turning yourself into a stud, and God says, guess what? The woman is not a Barbie doll and you're not a stud. You're human beings created in the image of God. University of Florida, guy steps out of the crowd and says, Cliff, you're wrong. I really love my girlfriend, and we're not married, and we have sex all the time. And we really love each other. I said, that's great. Tell me about how much you love her. He waxed poetic for a couple of minutes. I interrupted him and said, I got one question. Tonight she's involved in a car accident. Her pretty face is totally rearranged. Are you still going to love her tomorrow? And I really appreciated the guy's honesty. He said, no way, man. If her face is totally rearranged in a car wreck tonight, I'll go out and get some other fox who turns me on a little more. I said, okay, now let me ask you another question. Does she really love you? He says, yeah, man, she really loves me. I said, great. Tell me about it. He waxed poetic for a couple of minutes. I interrupted him and said, tonight, sir, you're involved in a horrible car wreck. Your handsome face is totally rearranged. Is she still going to love you tomorrow? The dude looks me in the face and says, yeah. I said, okay, my man, according to Jesus Christ, she is ready to make a lifelong commitment to you and to enjoy sex with you as a gift from God. But you, my man, are simply using her as a sex object. And guess what? Christ says that a woman is a human being with a mind, a personality, emotions, a will, and you are to respect her and treat her as a woman.
Yeah, I totally agree.
There can't be a lifelong commitment among two homosexual men or two homosexual women.
Well, I can promise you, I am very grateful when a homosexual man makes a lifelong commitment, or when a lesbian woman makes a lifelong commitment. I think that that's far better than living a promiscuous lifestyle. But according to Jesus Christ, God did not create us to have homosexual sex. He created us to have one man and one woman make a lifelong commitment, and then within that context to enjoy sex.
But I thought we were all created in God's image, and we were all created perfect. And our feelings come derived out of the way God made us.
That's where Jesus contradicts you. Jesus points out that although all of us are created with a bundle of good desires, we also, because of our sinful forefathers and foremothers, have been born with a bundle of evil desires, mixed up desires. We're Jekyll and Hydes, all of us. We are all this incredible combination of good and evil.
I'm very confused on to what is the Jekyll part? What is the Hyde part in love? Love that you say God gave us love. Are you saying love is not capable, like homosexuals are not capable of love?
No, all of my homosexual friends love. But when they engage in homosexual sex, that, according to Christ and according to the scriptures, is a perversion of the gift of human sexuality that God gave us. The same way when my heterosexual friends have sex with many different sex partners and call it love.
But
that is a perversion of the gift of sexuality that God has given them.
Okay, let's say that they're in a committed relationship, a committed long-term relationship, and there's sex. That's still a perversion?
Yeah, homosexual sex between two men, between two women, is a perversion of the gift of sexuality that God gave us according to Christ and according to the scriptures.
What is the according to Christ? Can you cite that, please?
Yes, Jesus treated the Old Testament, the Torah, as the Word of God. Clearly, as a first century Jew, respecting the Torah as the Word of God, it was real clear from the Torah that homosexual sex is wrong.
And, earlier in your arguments, you drew on Scripture and said that you believe this to be a literal translation and this to be something implied. Where do you draw the line there?
By reading in context.
Okay.
Studying literary style, asking who wrote it. Dennis Prager, the great Jewish thinker, points out that the Jews were sexual deviants. They deviated from the norm. All the cultures around the Jews celebrated homosexual sex, bisexual sex. Julius Caesar was every man's man and every woman's man. He was bisexual. Obviously, Socrates and the Greeks celebrated homosexual sex, heterosexual sex, bisexuality. Obviously, the Canaanites practiced homosexual sex, bestiality, heterosexual sex. It was the Jews who deviated from the norm of all the cultures around them. They insisted that God gave us our sexuality to be enjoyed between one man and one woman till death parts us. So to try and make an argument that Jesus, a first century monotheistic Jew who viewed the Old Testament as the Word of God, redefined homosexuality as being good, that's a big stretch.
Okay, I can see I'm not getting anywhere with you, and logic and morality is wasted on you. But I do believe that you do have a strong faith, and that I congratulate you for.
What do you think about Jesus Christ?
I believe that there is a higher power, but I believe that organized religion is not the answer, and that we all have internal faith that comes from somewhere that is not written by man, which all the religious texts were written by man.
What protects you from creating God according to your own biases, likes, dislikes, preferences? If God is just a higher power, what protects you from turning God into a Republican, white male, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, or a Democrat, or a liberal? In other words, if God is simply a feeling that you have, how do you know that you're not just worshiping yourself and your own feelings?
You don't, and that's why I feel as if it's an internal force. We all have to find our own faith. We all have to find our own sense of morality. Morality is not something you get from a book or from like other people.
Yep.
It's something you feel.
Then would you please answer me? How do you guarantee that the God that you worship is not simply the creation of your own feelings, your own prejudices?
Because I don't believe that we're supposed to understand. I don't think that we're supposed to understand that there is no message that was given to us. There's no message that they're saying that this is the right way to live. These are the things that happen in the world.
Right.
These are the way you should live your life. These are the
I hear
good
you.
things.
I respect you. Now, based on what you just said, what do you say to me when I tell you the God of my feelings, the God of my experience is white, and I am superior and he's inferior? What do you say to me?
I say that you can believe whatever you believe internally, but the moment that you externalize to someone else and you try to project your faith onto someone else is whenever everything goes wrong.
What are you doing right now?
I'm not. I'm saying what my faith is.
Thank
you are the one that
You're
asked
projecting
me.
your faith onto me and everybody else out here.
No, you
Yes.
asked me, sir.
You have you articulated it very clearly. And you said, I believe that God is simply a feeling, a higher power. Fine, I respect that. That's your belief.
And I'm not going to try to convince you of that because that's my belief.
What are you doing right now?
You asked me, sir, whenever I tried to leave. Like, I tried to leave and you asked me, what do you believe? And I'm expressing my beliefs right now. I'm not
Good.
saying you should believe that. I am saying that that is what I believe. And
Oh, no, sir. You made some very derogatory statements about me and my view of homosexuality, and
That
you
is
know
true.
it. Okay.
Because you are
So please
externalizing
don't
and
tell me that
projecting it onto all of
you
us.
just blandly came out here to enjoy the beautiful sunshine.
You
know
can't
very
infringe
well.
on other people's
you
rights
came out
and
here with an
feelings.
agenda, and you made it real clear about what you feel and think about my view of homosexual sex. Now, I respect your right to say that, but I'm going to take what you say seriously.
Okay.
And when you go on and tell me that God is simply a higher power and God is simply what I feel, you are opening yourself up to problems up the wazoo. And I'm trying to point that out to you in this incredibly racist view of God that I've just articulated. And I'm saying, sir, you can't live out what you believe. Because you know very well that if I tell you my feeling of the higher power is that he's a white male, and therefore I am superior to him, you know that I'm full of garbage. I hope.
Yes.
And you're
but-
not going to kick back and say, well, that's your higher power and that's cool.
You know, I mean, I believe that, I personally do not agree with abortion. This is my example. I do not agree with abortion. I do not agree with restricting abortion. I do not believe in, I'm not a pro-life person. But whenever someone believes in pro-life, that's fine. They can believe all they want in whatever feeling they have, but as long as you don't try to inflict that upon me or upon someone else, that's fine. The problem with your thing right now is if you've taken an argument class, you're committing a fallacy. There is not a disconnect, and this is not the argument you are trying to make is not a cohesive argument.
Where's the breakdown?
Your evidence does not draw the conclusion that you're making.
And so Dr. Martin Luther King, because of his faith in Jesus Christ, because of his understanding that there's a God who precedes the human mind, who has created and defined human worth, human value, and the value of justice, Dr. Martin Luther King said, your laws, state of Alabama, are unjust. It's the only way you can logically critique the laws of culture. You can't do it as a moral relativist. Because if you're a moral relativist, everything's relative. It's exactly what I was trying to pin you on with this idea of God. That God is a feeling that I have. He's a power. Fine. If that's true, if God is a feeling that I have, then if my God is a white God who asserts white supremacy,
And
that's true for me.
That's exactly how they that's exactly how they believed.
And they're wrong.
And that's part of your Christian faith.
No. What's part of your faith is they're not wrong. They're relative, which means they're right for themselves. As a follower of Christ, I look those racists in the face and I say, you are wrong. 100% wrong. Because God created all people and God don't make junk. That's why you're wrong. But you, sir, have no basis to tell the racist that he's wrong. Don't you get it logically?
Stop the TSA from touching our genitals! That's important!
You know,
What you got to say about that?
pretty much. That's
That God is a feeling that I have. He's a power. Fine. If that's true, if God is a feeling that I have, then if my God is a white God who asserts white supremacy,
and that's
that's
exactly
true for me.
exactly how they used to. That's exactly how they believed. Like,
and they're wrong.
and that's part of your Christian faith.
No. What's part of your faith is they're not wrong. They're relative, which means they're right for themselves. As a follower of Christ, I look those racists in the face and I say, you are wrong. 100% wrong. Because God created all people and God don't make junk. That's why you're wrong. But you, sir, have no basis to tell the racist that he's wrong.
People can believe what they want.
Yeah.
Those racist people, they could believe what they want, but once they inflicted themselves upon and limited someone else's rights, which they did,
Yeah.
these racist people inflicted themselves upon someone else, that is where they're wrong. And that is exactly what I've been saying the entire time.
And what I'm saying to you is you can't say they're wrong in an objective, absolute sense, because you're a relativist, remember? And if you're going to be consistent and not be an intellectual hypocrite, you got to stick with what you believe. So if you tell me that everything's relative, that God is relative, I just have my own feelings, and therefore God is whatever I feel, which means God is just a relative, subjective experience, then obviously morality is totally relative. You cannot look at the white racist and say, you're wrong. What you can say is, from my perspective, from my subjective opinion, I disagree, but you're right for yourself, I'm right for myself. There's no such thing as objectively wrong. Because, sir, remember, reality for you is subjective. It's all relative. So just live out what you tell me you believe.
I am. You believe in a subjective value of Christianity. Like, you take the Bible, like taking just your example of the Bible, you take parts of it and you go, hey, this I'm going to believe at face value because this is the exact word of the Lord. And then later on you go, this was just a moral example of what could have happened or what somebody could have believed. You can't argue a morality. You can't argue morality objectively in general. You can't. There's no way to say what is wrong to some person is right to another. Like you just can't.
Sir, if there's a God, then it's possible that there is an objective value of justice, created and defined by God. If there is no God, there is no objective value of justice. It's all relative. Sir, it's that simple. Do you follow that?
Yes, but who's your God? Who's your God? Where did you come from? Where were you born? And would you believe this if you were born in some place that didn't have the word of the Lord?
What?
Where would you get your morality then? Where would your morality come from?
My conscience and my rational mind
yes, your conscience
informs me
yes, your conscience.
that there are objective morals. Now, in light of the fact that my conscience informs me that there are objective morals, I better ask myself, which worldview, which faith squares with reality? Atheism? Relativism? No, that does not square with my conscience. Theism, belief that there's got to be some type of God who has given me a conscience and has created objective morals. That squares with my experience of reality.
And that is the exact place where we will never agree, because I believe conscience comes from within, and you believe it'll come from God. And I'm tired of taking
all I've asked you to do is just live it out. Just remember, the guy who date rapes has not done something objectively wrong, because your worldview is relativism.
He just inflicted upon somebody else's rights. That is...
It's relative, man. Just be consistent.
Comes from your conscience.
Which is totally relative and subjective.
True.
Okay? The Nazis, not wrong. The Bosnian Serb who rapes and murders women, not wrong in an objective sense. The KKK who teach their children to be racist, not wrong. It's their own subjective, relative take on morality. That's your worldview.
I just said that there's no objective sense. You cannot objectively define morals.
Exactly. So just live it out. Don't you dare look into the face of the KKK and tell them what you're doing is absolutely wrong. Look in the face of the KKK and say, it's all relative. Now, from my experience, it's not good. I'm not going to do it. But your experience is different. So I've got my views. You've got your views. You're not wrong. I'm not right. It's all relative. Just live that out. See if it
I'm
works.
living that out.
No, you're not.
And
No, I'll tell you why.
Yeah,
Because if you were living it out, you wouldn't be upset with my view of homosexualality. If you're really living out your view, you'd say
your Christian
cool.
values are inflicting upon somebody else's.
No, I'm not inflicting anything on you.
You are blocking homosexuality's right to marriage, to a way of being together in your sense of morality, in the way that your God has decided that this is how people procreate, or this is how people have sex.
That is total falsehood. I have not prevented you from having homosexual sex. You do not need my permission to go out and have homosexual sex. You can do that quite on your own, and if anybody tries to physically stop you, I will disagree with them, okay? Because I live in a democracy, because I live in a free society, if the law of the land says you can do what you want to privately in your home, if you want to have homosexual sex, I support your right to do that. So don't stereotype me, because that's very narrow-minded and very intolerant of you. I support your right to have sex with a man, with a woman, with an animal, whatever you choose to.
Just your God does not.
I'm going to warn you, I'm going to stand here and tell you that watch out, if you have sex outside of the context of a monogamous heterosexual relationship, you're violating the purpose for which God gave you your sexuality. Sure, I'll tell you that.
I'm done. So thank you.
All right, man. Take care.
I'm a Muslim. I'm a Shia Muslim. You talk about praying in unison. We do that as Muslims. You bring up these different points as to how your God is not my God because you see Jesus Christ as, I guess, the image of God, correct?
As God in human form.
God in human form, okay. So then, Jesus is a prophet, Prophet Isa, within the Muslim culture. So, as a Muslim, we respect other religions. We call them people of the book. If you respect another religion, there's no wrong religion in that essence. From your standpoint, because I am Muslim, because I have an imam who is not a messenger but an interpreter, is my religion wrong or askew in any context?
I have the utmost respect for Muhammad in the way, after growing up as an orphan in poverty, he makes one of the 5 pillars, almsgiving, giving to the poor. I respect that highly. I think that's absolutely fantastic. Secondly, I respect Muhammad for the way he led the Arab people out of polytheism into monotheism. I think that's outstanding. Obviously, where I disagree with Muhammad is regarding the identity of Jesus Christ. Who is Jesus? Obviously, the Quran teaches that Jesus is not God. He's a good prophet. Obviously, the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John insist Jesus claimed to be God, and he did things as God. He accepted the worship of people as being an appropriate response to him. So obviously, my question from my Muslim friends is, are you sure that Jesus is just a prophet? Obviously, Muhammad was not born until 500 years after Christ, so he never met Jesus. The eyewitnesses insisted Jesus claimed to be God. He accepted worship as appropriate. So, who is Jesus?
I mean, if I look at the lessons of Jesus, in my room, I have the Bible and then I have the Quran. And I've legitimately started reading both of them and pretty much just putting in my own synthesis as to the comparisons between the two. And as you go through these lessons, you see they are very similar in more than one manner, and probably every single matter except for the fact that Jesus is God or Jesus is not God and he is a prophet. I think that's probably the largest difference between the two. But if I'm taking those lessons that Jesus gave as a prophet to me, as a God to you, if I take those lessons and I follow them properly, except for the part about Jesus being a God, why would that make me incorrect? And if I am incorrect, does that put me at a lesser heaven or to a hell rather than going to where every, proper Christian would go?
Oh, well, proper Christians deserve to go to hell. The only reason a Christian goes to heaven is because they realize I deserve hell, but Christ bled and died on a cross for my sin, and I've accepted his sacrifice for me. So proper Christians don't go to heaven because they're proper people. All right? It's all grace.
All right.
And you see, that is a basic contradiction between Islam and Christianity. You know, in Islam, you have to follow the 5 pillars, and you better do it well. And if you do it well, you go to heaven. And if you don't do it well, you go to hell. Jesus Christ says, no, you don't go to heaven by following the 10 Commandments or by following the Sermon on the Mount. You go to heaven because you realize, I am in desperate need of God's forgiveness, His mercy, His grace. And I throw myself upon Christ for that forgiveness, for that grace. You see, so you can't have it both ways. Either heaven is something that we earn and we deserve because we've kept the rules, or heaven is a gift that God gives us by grace.
And so, like, as a Muslim, and so I'm a Shia, Ismaili Muslim. I'm about 1% of the whole Muslim population. I'm this really small sect. And the very first line in the Quran, or anything that any of our prayers, is Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. And essentially the way that we've been taught that from our Imam, the interpreter, Aga Khan IV, the way it works out is man will sin, right? Like it's gonna happen no matter what. And the way that we've been taught, it is our goal to continuously approach and try to better ourselves, and we do need God for that forgiveness. And to me, it seems like what you preach is the same thing that I've been preached to my whole life.
Okay, except that the question is, how does God forgive? Remember, God is unchanging, right?
Correct.
So you and I both agree, God is unchanging. Well then, if God is unchanging, how does He forgive me for my evil, for my wrongdoing? That's where the cross of Christ is so crucial. Because Christ claims that the evil that I have done has to be punished, because God is just. And forgiveness cannot contradict justice. God's not schizophrenic. At the cross, Christ lays down His life to absorb the just penalty for our wrongdoing, thereby offering us the option of forgiveness if we choose it. See, so obviously in the Quran, the idea of Christ going to the cross is unacceptable because God would never allow a good prophet to die such a horrible death, right? But in the Gospels, what we have is, they're not biographies. They focus on this cruel, crass death of Christ on a cross. Why do they focus on that? Because Jesus insisted that it's His death on the cross that's the linchpin. It's the key to reconciliation with God. It's the way God forgives us, by absorbing the penalty for our sin, thereby offering us forgiveness. So His justice is honored, and He offers mercy, forgiveness.
So I guess it's kind of like in closing, right? My fear, the reason I ask this question is because my fear is, as a Muslim, if I don't do the proper things, and if I'm not the right religion, say I'm not like, say being Christianity is the right religion, and like taking Jesus in, if that is the right thing, but I don't believe it, am I going to hell? And if I don't want to go to hell, should I convert? And if I convert and I do it out of fear, am I still going to heaven because I do it for the wrong reasons? Rather than for forgiveness, I do it for fear?
Okay, good question. All right, we have to be brutally honest with each other. If Muhammad spoke the truth, I am going to hell. Because I don't worship Allah, I don't accept Muhammad as his prophet. So I'm going to hell. If Jesus Christ spoke the truth, and I reject Christ, His death on the cross, His deity, then I'm going to hell.
So in this case, you're going to hell and I'm going to hell from each other's standpoints, correct?
Correct.
All right.
According to Muhammad, I am going to hell. According to Jesus Christ, anybody who rejects Him is going to spend eternity separate from Him. That'll be hell. So, because we're thinking human beings, we had better ask ourselves, what is the truth? And we better follow the evidence. And if the evidence is that Muhammad speaks the truth, we better follow Muhammad. If the evidence is Jesus Christ spoke the truth, we better follow Jesus Christ. Or if the evidence is Siddhartha Gautama Buddha or the avatars of Hinduism spoke the truth, we better follow the evidence. Or if the evidence is that there is no God, we better be atheist.
So then how do we tell, like, between Christianity and Islam specifically, all we have to compare are these two books, correct? We have these two books, we have scriptures that follow both of them.
Good.
We have a history that comes with both of them.
Good.
How do we know which one's evidence is more factual? How do we know which one's is more true? How do I know which one to follow and not end up in the wrong place? Because that is my fear.
Good, excellent question. First point, we better study both books to find out, are they accurate or not?
Which is what I've begun doing.
Good. And I think the evidence is clear. The Quran is reliable. The Quran has been carefully preserved over the past 1,500 years. If anybody wants to try and maintain that the Quran is inaccurate, they're out to lunch. I am convinced. The evidence is very carefully preserved over the past 1,500 years. You have a very accurate presentation of what Muhammad taught. The same thing is true of the Gospels. Very carefully recorded, a plethora of manuscript evidence to support the reliability. Okay, so we've got two very accurate books, the Quran and the Gospels. Now, obviously, they contradict each other, although there are similarities.
Definitely.
A lot of similarities, but also contradictions.
Okay.
So now the bottom line question is, does the evidence point to the fact that you can trust Muhammad to speak the truth, or does the evidence point to Jesus Christ being trustworthy? Now, here's how I would go about that. Examine life, style. How did Jesus treat women? How did Muhammad treat women? How did Jesus treat his enemies? How did Muhammad treat his enemies? Those types of questions, lifestyle. Second question, ethical teaching. What are the ethical teachings of Muhammad? What are the ethical teachings of Christ? Are there internal contradictions, or is there an internal consistency? Third question, how did they die? Obviously, in the Gospels, Jesus dies an excruciatingly painful death, forgiving his enemies. Obviously, that demands my respect. Fourth question, what happens after they die? Obviously, in the Gospels, you have an historical resurrection of Christ, and you have eyewitnesses who see him risen from the dead. So study the two, Muhammad in the Quran and Jesus in the Gospels, and ask yourself, what does the evidence point to? Who is more reliable, Muhammad or Christ?